exceptional.
The Reds have the core of a great pitching staff in place, but the gaps need filling in. How they can go about doing that will be our focus for today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Aloha and welcome to the live edition, the Aloha Friday live edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. You are Locked On Reds. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen of the day. Maybe not today because we are a little later and live, but we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Stephen Offenbaker, alongside Jeff Carr, and we have a passion for baseball. We have a passion for the Cincinnati Reds, and we have taken that passion and we have turned it into information for you. On today's podcast, we are going to begin to discuss whether or not the Reds should go out and get another starting pitcher, and if they do, exactly who that should be. Jeff and I are also going to take a look at potential bullpen upgrades and see if there's somebody out there that the Reds can add to really help overhaul this bullpen. And of course, we are going to be taking your questions and comments all along the way since we are live on YouTube. So get those questions and comments into the comment section down below. We'll be going through those throughout the show. And then a little bit later, we will put you in the driver's seat and talk about whatever it is within reason that you want to talk about on today's special live edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. This show today is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online is where the game starts. All right, Jeff, we've kicked this around a little bit as we have navigated our way through the postseason, and we're really reaching the point where the offseason is about to get fully underway. So hopefully, like you and I have been looking at this thing, Nick Craw has been looking at this thing and made some decisions about where this team is going to go. One of the things that has come up in conversations between me and you and conversations that I had with Chris Welsh last week is about the starting pitching and the fact that while the big three are great in Nick Lodolo, Hunter Green, and Graham Ashcraft, you need more than three. As a matter of fact, you need more than five because the days of Major League Baseball rotation having five guys that pitch the entire season are pretty much over. So the Reds are going to need to go out and get some guys, and not just guys. We did that last season. We did that in 2022. We just put guys out there and hope for the best. What they're going to need is some guys that they can trust.
Yes, and when you talk about trust, like, I want to be clear on that because I feel like Connor Overton has pitched well in the couple of times we got to see him, but he's coming back from a back injury. Like, to say that you trust that to be completely healthy, that would be a foolish statement. And we're not strategizing around him coming back completely healthy, ready to go. The Reds need to have, a backup plan. They also need to have a backup plan in case Brandon Williamson isn't ready. Because if we look at this, really, other than Green, Lodolo, and Ashcraft, you're looking at Justin Dunn, you're looking at Connor Overton, you're looking at Brandon Williamson as like your three best options to fill the 4 and 5 spot. And two of those guys are coming back from injuries. So I really want to see the Reds add some trust, basically, a trust fall type deal here with a free agent pitcher or a trade or something like that.
So, one of the things you and I talked about last week is that there's not going to be a signing that's going to result in a giant press conference.
Right.
We specifically talked about this with a guy like Johnny Cueto, and Cueto's already finding his name into the comment section, Jeff. This from Branch Brown, like Pittsburgh fans. Cueto. Listen, we talked about this last week. Johnny Cueto's not coming here. He's going to cost a whole lot of money. He had a tremendous season last season for the Chicago White Sox. He's not in the Reds price range. They're not going to do it. But there are guys they could go get that would, while not rocking the baseball world, could result in a miniature press conference moment. And the first guy you've identified that they may go look at is a guy that would actually generate a little press conference moment.
Yeah, I want this guy. I want the Reds to go get Corey Kluber because I feel like Corey Kluber is the quintessential mix of talent, but also kind of needs to prove something right now. And he's in the latter stages of his career. He's going to be 37 next year. When it comes to pitching ages, that's almost a million. So there's that. But he didn't have the best season. He was fine last year, and it went out with a whimper, the way that he gave up in the wild card game there as the late inning during extra innings, giving up the runs there that knocked the Rays out of the postseason. But I think that he is a guy that contenders aren't going to rush to sign. And with that opens the door for a team like the Reds, who are looking for established guys who can be innings eaters that are better than Mike Minor. Let's put this out. We're not bringing back Mike Minor, because I know he was supposed to be an innings eater and he didn't do any of that. But I want to see them go get Corey Kluber because he still shows an ability, and he does a thing that the Reds need. He doesn't strike out a ton of guys anymore, Steve, but he limits walks. In fact, I think he led the major leagues in lowest walks per nine last year. And that, more than anything, makes him attractive for me to want the Reds to go get him.
And from the Red standpoint, all of those things you said are absolutely true. And he, he's not going to come in here and be an ace. He's not going to come in here and pitch anywhere but the fourth or fifth spot in the rotation if the Reds were to sign him. But for the casual baseball fan, it's a name they know. It's a proven commodity. It's something that the casual baseball fan, I think, would be excited about. And for that reason, I think it will at least make Nick Krall possibly pay attention. There's some other guys, though, Jeff. Matthew Boyd is another pitcher that the Reds could go get. And while he didn't start after coming off of injury, he had that flexor tendon surgery, Jeff, in 2021. But if you're talking about guys that can maybe come in on team-friendly prove-it deals, this is another pitcher that could possibly do that. I know the Tigers, his former team, are interested in bringing him back. And that tells me, because they're going to have the best information about this pitcher. They're going to know more than anybody else about his health status. That tells me that as far as the injury goes, that's in his rearview mirror.
And it fits a pattern that the Reds have done the last couple of years. They signed veteran starters to come in. And what side of the mound did they throw on, Steve? Wade Miley, Mike Minor.
Beautiful left-handed pitchers. Beautiful left-handed pitchers.
And that's what Matt Boyd does. Matt Boyd is a lefty pitcher, southpaw. And yeah, like we mentioned, he was a relief pitcher last year because of the recovery. And I don't think he had the recovery timetable to come back as a starter for the Mariners and have a successful season. So they probably sat down with him and strategized and said, the best way for you to help our team is out of the bullpen. So that's what they did. I don't think this is a situation where his career is moving toward the bullpen. He could be a relevant starter, albeit probably for a middle-of-the-road to non-contending team. That's why the Tigers are thinking about him. They have a lot of injuries. Casey Mize, Tariq Skubal are going to miss significant time even next year because of the injuries they incurred this year. So they're going to need to build up their rotation depth as well. So this might be a bidding war, and it might play them a little bit out for him. But on the same point, I would love to see Boyd added to the rotation.
LG in the comment section, Jeff, makes an interesting point. He says Kluber would be a good fit for the Reds. He pitched well for the uber analytical Rays. With the Reds, he could give them length. But with all of these pitchers we're discussing, Jeff, do they want to be part of a rebuild? That's an actually really good question for a guy like Kluber, who doesn't have a lot of baseball left in that arm. I would imagine. Would he want to come to Cincinnati, do you think, and pitch for this team?
I think that's part there's another question that's part of that, and that is, are contenders interested in them? Because if there's no contenders that are coming calling and they still want to play, they're going to have to prove it on a team like the Reds. And I think that's where I start with Corey Kluber, is that I don't see a lot of contenders adding him to the mix. Like, if they add him to the mix, it would be on a, vet minimum, maybe a minor league deal with an invite to spring training, something like that. And I think the Reds could offer him a major league deal, which, if I were Corey Kluber, I'm probably still thinking I can do this, and I would want to do. That's a lot of speculation, I do understand, but I still look at Kluber, I look at Boyd, and a couple of other guys that we have listed out to talk about, as in they're probably not fitting on a major league roster for a contending team next year.
Well, let's get to one of these next guys that we have on the list, Jeff, because I think this might be a gamble. You have Mike Clevenger on here, and that one makes me really nervous because he didn't pitch at all coming off of a Tommy John surgery. He missed all of 2021, and then wasn't healthy fully again in 2022. And I know knee sprains, but pitchers and legs, those injuries don't go very well together. So walk me through why you think he might be a good fit for the Reds.
I think it's because of that, Steve, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of teams that are ready to trust his health. And the Reds have the luxury of, well, we're not really going for anything anyway. If he is healthy right now in the offseason, you sign him, you hope he catches lightning in a bottle, stays healthy toward the trade deadline, and you flip him. Because then you're going to get the value for a guy like Clevenger, because Clevenger isn't in the mold of Corey Kluber or Matthew Boyd, where he's in the latter stages of his career. He's still kind of in the middle, maybe the latter stages of his prime or something like that, if he does come back healthy. So the Reds could possibly get him on a prove-it type deal 1 year, and we're going to keep using that, so I don't want to overuse that statement of prove-it type deal. But he could be a 1 year type dude that if he does catch his lightning in a bottle in April, May, and June, you can flip him, a la pitching version of Brandon Drury.
He makes me nervous, Jeff. I'm going to be honest. Like, we have enough problems and we had enough problems with injuries in 2022 that I don't know that I want to take a flyer on another guy that is coming in banged up. But I do see your point. That might be the reason why we
would also have to get used to watching that wind up too. There'd be that.
Well, and Chris Welsh tells us in our sit down, if you recall, that Major League Baseball is going to be cracking down on herky-jerky, wonky windup. So a lot of pitchers could look different in 2023. But there's one more guy we need to get to before we move on to the bullpen in the next segment, Jeff, and that's Kyle Gibson. Now, yes. I don't know, Jeff. You're talking about a guy that had last season a 5+ ERA, and 2 seasons before that had a 5+ ERA. Now I know that he had a decent season kind of wedged in between there, but I wonder which one of these guys is the real Kyle Gibson, and do we want to spend money on that particular type of question?
Well, here's the thing about that, Steve, is that last year he didn't make like a ton of money as a starting pitcher. And this year, based on those numbers and based on where the Phillies will probably go after this World Series, I don't think they're going to bring him back. So he's going to be out there. He's going to be looking for a job. And do you know where the best place to prove it that you are the guy that pitched in 2021 and not 2022 or 2019? Cincinnati. Because you're going to be able to show I can pitch in a hitter's ballpark, and I am still that guy. I am still the guy that a contender can trust. Again, I look at him almost as being like a Jeff Suppan type deal. Nobody was ever excited about signing Jeff Suppan in January, but they were excited about acquiring Jeff Suppan in July. Give me Kyle Gibson, new Jeff Suppan type dude. He's done it before. He's been a decently successful pitcher, but again, this is a guy that is not going to threaten any of the rookie pitchers. And I think that's another thing that I forgot to highlight with all these guys is any of them, even Corey Kluber, former Cy Young Award winner, none of them are going to come in here and make Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, or Graham Ashcraft sweat about their spot in the rotation.
That's probably a fair point, Jeff. In fact, the core for this rotation is in place. It's going to be built around those three guys: Lodolo, Green, Ashcraft. Those are your big three. The core is in place, but the Reds are going to have to make an effort to bring in a supporting cast to round out that rotation and have spare parts around should injury strike in 2023.
Yeah, and that's just the rotation, Steve. We haven't talked about the bullpen yet, which we will coming up here in just a moment. But before we talk about that bullpen, Steve, the odds for the World Series that starts tonight are as follows. You've got the Phillies at plus 160, a.k.a. Nick Castellanos, and you've got the Astros at minus 180, obviously the favorite, a.k.a. Dusty Baker. Who you picking?
I've been thinking long and hard about this, actually, Jeff, because I'm torn. I want Dusty to get a ring. I think Dusty deserves a ring. I would love to see that happen. Also would love to see Nick Castellanos get a ring and really just, he's
living his best life after the NLCS.
He's doing it. And, I really struggle with this. Here's what I want. I want this series to go 7 games. I want Houston to win it in extra innings of game 7, Dusty to get his ring and be able to retire and ride off into the sunset. And then Nick Castellanos will get another chance down the road. We hope. I'm taking the Astros in 7.
Well, I know somebody that will be very, very happy to hear you say that. He is Brett Chansey, one of our co-hosts of Locked On Astros, because obviously he wants the Astros to win. Plus, he has tickets to Game 5, so he hopes that it at least goes 5 games. But I think, honestly, I think I'm with you. I think that Castellanos still has an opportunity. These Phillies are just getting started. I don't see this as a flash-in-the-pan type team. They've got guys that are under control for a couple of years. And also, I might actually go with the crowd on this, because on our community page on the Locked On Reds YouTube channel, I got a poll up, who you rooting for, Castellanos or Dusty Baker, and Castellanos is up 57% to 43% for Dusty. So I think I'm taking Dusty Baker. I'm going to go against the crowd on this one. I'm with you. I think I'm going to go with Astros. Plus the Astros, man, they just look so stacked. Although all the upheaval in their front office is very interesting. Anyway, yeah, those are the odds at Bet Online. Astros minus 180 for the series. And I tell you what, if you want to find the best information for your next bet, you head on over to betonline.net, because betonline.net has you covered for the Major League Baseball World Series. They've got you covered for the NFL regular season as it's rolling on. Jamar Chase, get back soon, man. But this will show us the true mettle of Joe Burrow. Anyway, you can also find NBA regular season, and you've got college football. Everything is at betonline.net. They've got props. They've got odds. They've got point spreads, money lines. They've got some different bets in there. I think I saw them tweet out the odds on Tom Brady's next girlfriend. You can literally bet on everything. That's on betonline.net, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Make sure that you join us on Monday. Boy, we've got a hot button topic issue for you. Tony Perez and Joey Votto. We're going to lay down the gauntlet on Monday. You're not going to want to miss that as we kind of look over some interesting all-time greats in the Reds franchise history. But, Steve, we are back to this offseason and how the Reds are going to improve the present, because we've got to look at this bullpen. It's very obvious who leads it. It's Alexis Diaz. Alexis Diaz is at the top of the pyramid. There's a lot of guys that are filling out the rest of this pyramid. And you're talking about dudes that got more playing time than you would have thought they would have seen. But before we jump into that, let's take a question.
All right. Let me find us one. Let's see a bullpen question. Here, this one comes from Matt. What is the likelihood Brandon Williamson breaks camp with the Reds to start 2023?
Yeah, this is an interesting one, because we're talking about a dude that once he got to AAA, he struggled. And not just struggling, giving up hits, giving up runs and things like that. He walked a lot of guys. And we know from experience, Cody Reed, if you come up to the major leagues and you walk guys, things don't work out. So I don't necessarily know if we're going to figure out where his control is at spring training. I find this a little bit hard to buy into, that he will break camp with the major league club.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Matter of fact, I'll just put it like this. If the same Brandon Williamson shows up at the beginning of spring training 2023 that finished 2022, he's not ready. He needs more time. He's going to have to pitch at least a couple more months down in Louisville before I would consider him, having shown us enough to be a different guy. Now, don't get me wrong. He could come into Goodyear and mow guys down. Remember that doesn't mean a whole lot. Remember how excited we got about certain pitchers striking out every single batter they faced in Arizona, and then they come to Cincinnati and get rocked out of the bullpen.
I think he's in Kansas City now.
He's in Kansas City now. Amir Garrett was fantastic in spring training and got absolutely hammered when the season started. That's because these guys are facing minor league players that are nowhere near ready. It's filler guys a lot of the time, especially relief pitchers. It's a little different for the starters, but remember that even the starters aren't starting every game. They're coming in inning 3 or 4. It's all programmed. So you can't put a whole lot in what happens out in Arizona. So I'm going to need to see a whole lot in Goodyear if we're going to consider, putting another rookie in the rotation with 3 second-year guys in that rotation at 1, 2, and 3. It's going to take a lot for me to want to do that. So I think it's probably a safer bet. We just did that bet online read. So it's a safer bet to say that Williamson comes somewhere around mid-season.
I agree. And that's just another reason why they need to shore up the depth in the starting rotation. Speaking of depth, let's shore up the depth in the bullpen. Let's look at a couple of options here, Steven. I want to start out with something interesting because we mentioned Aroldis Chapman the other day on the pod. We said, don't want him. Absolutely not. Probably not even the Reds price range anyway. But according to SpotTrack.com, which is a great resource whenever you're tracking free agents and possible signings, they have a tab that says market value. So what you could probably expect them to sign, average annual value, like per year numbers. And I found this interesting because SpotTrack has Aroldis Chapman, Craig Kimbrell, and Corey Knebel, all guys who have extensive closing experience, around $6 million average annual value. Are you interested in any one of those guys?
I'm going to start with Aroldis Chapman. No, I'm not interested. I don't think at $6 million it's worth having to tolerate his off-field side show. I'm not interested in doing that. I think the Reds have had enough drama generated by the ownership group in the last season. We narrowly missed out on the Trevor Bauer drama. Let's not go down that road. Let's not do that to a franchise that's already in the shambles and trying to dig itself out. Let's stay away from, controversial type signings. And I think that Chapman would be a controversial type signing. And like you said, when we talked about this a little bit last week, he's looking for the bright lights in the big city. He's looking to pitch in postseason baseball and looking to he believes he's still, the A1 closer type guy, and, let him go do that someplace else. Now, the other guys you mentioned, Kimbrell, Knebel, at $6 million, I'd take a flyer on one of those guys being, arm 1B behind your boy Alexis Diaz. I'd be all in on that.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I wonder about any one of these guys. And I don't want to get too deep into coddling egos and things like that. But if you're going to add a guy like Kimbrell, you might be worrying Alexis Diaz a little bit. And I don't necessarily know that that's going to be the case, but the depth would be very awesome if you're talking about having those guys at the top of the bullpen. Corey Knebel struggled mightily at the beginning of last season and got replaced pretty quickly by the Phillies, but he's had a pretty solid career. Could be an intriguing bounce back candidate if he comes in on a cheap deal.
Jeff, you've started a little side conversation over in the YouTube comments. We're just going to circle through a couple of these real quick. Your talk of Cody Reed has got people talking. Brent Brown's laughing because you brought up Cody Reed. And then, of course, Steve McCoy drops in, he should have dropped the goggles. I will not tolerate goggles slander. Chris Sabo set the standard for the rec specs. And I loved the fact that Cody, followed in that rich Cincinnati tradition while he was
I really wanted him to work out, man. I really loved him coming over in that Johnny Cueto deal, and obviously he was the key piece. And there's a little bit of parallel there because Brandon Williamson was kind of seen as the top piece of that Seattle trade. But yeah,
I did too. In fact, I don't know if you recall, but I had him on as a guest in the Reds Alert days. Great guy to talk to, fun to talk baseball with. Loved him. Yeah, sorry, didn't want to sidetrack you, but you're generating side talk over here in the YouTube comments, and I'm here for it. And if for all you guys watching us live, we're live. Keep those comments coming. Keep those questions rolling in, because coming up, you guys are going to be in the driver's seat.
We'll leave the rest of the unfortunate player callbacks to another show. Let's look back here at this bullpen, because, okay, so those are the guys. They're probably more expensive on the expensive side, although there's one other guy so far as probably will garner a little bit of what we think the Reds free agent budget of 20 to 25, 30 million, something like that, is going to be, and that's Adam Ottavino. Now, he's not a guy that's going to be looking for a prove-it deal. I do understand that. But you could get him on like a 2-year deal, probably about 5 or 6 million apiece. And he is an absolute stud of a setup man. Talking about an easy lead-in, an easy harbinger for Alexis Diaz in probably what we will think is the 9th inning. I know that we always talk about bullpen ace and things like that, but I know that they're really going to, have him for closing opportunities quite a bit. But in the event that maybe he pitches in the 7th or 8th inning in a high leverage situation, then you could go to Ottavino in the 9th. He is a guy that you can trust, and I think that trust should be something that you can find, like even with these prove it type guys. That's why I mentioned grizzled vet type dudes, because you can still, there's something about their career that you can trust. Adam Ottavino, you can definitely trust out of the bullpen.
And and you just hit on a really good selling point for the Reds to, try and get an Ottavino type to come here, and that is you're going to close some. We are not going to use this bullpen traditionally. Our guy is Alexis Diaz. However, if we need him in the 7th, he's going to pitch the 7th. That means you're going to be the guy to close the game that day. So I think that could actually be a talking point, a selling point for Nick Krall in trying to get some of these guys in here, because as much as, Ottavino looks at himself maybe as an elite setup guy, he wants those saves. Nobody make the mistake of thinking he just wants to be a setup man. He wants those saves. He wants the spotlight. So I think that's a great talking point and a great selling point.
I agree. And there's 2 other guys too. One of them was a closer in the past, Alex Colomé, and then Brad Boxberger, former Reds prospect who was in the Matt Latos trade. I would love to see either one of those guys come in, because Colomé has had a rough couple of years. Prove it deal is for certain wherever he goes. And then Brad Boxberger, I think, has shown, because whenever they traded Josh Hader from Milwaukee, they tried Boxberger out as their closer, and he just didn't quite work. I think he is, for some reason, he's one of those guys that has a mental block about the 9th, so he's more of a middle relief type dude. Colomé or Boxberger really adds to the depth of this bullpen, should they be able to go out and get one of those. Or one of those guys preferable to you, or is that just you're just kind of looking for depth in this bullpen?
I'm looking for depth. I'm looking for guys that belong in the major leagues, and all of these guys have the ability to pitch against major league hitters. So that in of itself is an upgrade for what we were actually dealing with in 2022. So I'll take any one of those guys. You mentioned a multi-year deal for a guy like Ottavino, and in the comment section that was responded to with great, it would give us something to look forward to. I think there's a little bit of something to that too. If you can get one of these guys that are, under the age of 36, it might be worth taking a flyer on a 2-year deal to keep some stability out in that bullpen while you continue to build out both the starting rotation with the young prospects and the lineup with the young prospects. Create some stability, have some veterans on the pitching staff that can work with the young guys and talk to the young guys. There's some importance there. So it wouldn't hurt my feelings at all if they gave one of these guys a 2-year deal.
And there's precedent for that. I remember both Jared Hughes and David Hernandez came over for multi-year, I think it was 2-year deals. I can't remember exactly if they had options added onto that, but they were multi-year deals as well. So it's not as if that would be foreign to the Reds. I'd be interested to see if they could pull something off like that. But I think when we look at the possibilities for the Reds to add to this bullpen, the big takeaway is trust is key. When you're looking at a guy, we're not talking about advocating for them to go out and fill out the bullpen with flyers, waivers, guys that they get on minor league deals with invites to spring training. I want to see 1 or 2 of these major league deals for guys that we can trust.
Absolutely agree. 100%. All right, Jeff, we have reached my favorite part of the live shows. Right after this break, we are going to put the comment section in the driver's seat. We'll be taking your comments and questions on just about anything that you want to talk about. And we're going to do that right after this. All right. You can follow the podcast on all platforms, including right here on YouTube. Click the subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss an episode, never miss us going live. You can also follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at S. Offenbaker. You can follow Jeff at Jeff Carr. That's Jeff with 3 Fs. And you can follow the show at Locked On Reds. For our audio listeners, this is a special bonus edition. This is the Q&A portion of our live show that was in your feed a little earlier today. For the YouTubers that are watching right now, we are going to continue on right now with you in the driver's seat with your questions and comments. All right, Jeff, let's see where people want to go. Let's start right here with William Martin asking us, what do we see happening with TJ Antone, Tony Santillan, and Lucas Sims?
I think we'll see 2 of those 3 on opening day. I wonder about Antone. Like, I don't know that he is going to be ready right out of the gate because, I mean, second Tommy John, and it happened late in the year 2020 or 2021. So it's not as if we're talking about the exact long enough timetable. Like, it's possible. He probably could come back if he really furiously worked. And from all indications are that's what he's been doing. But I still think that if they're smart, they know the talent that they saw from Antone. They know what he can do. They're not going to rush him back. And I would probably think May 1st is a good just spitballing timeline where I kind of want to see him. I don't want to see him rush back and then, he's got another little arm injury that he has to go back on the shelf for like a month or 2.
Yeah, I think TJ Antone's probably the biggest question mark of those 3 for all of the reasons that you just mentioned. And like you said, second Tommy John surgery, that's big deal. Like the first one nowadays has become pretty routine. Once you have that second one, though, there's no guarantee he makes it back. I mean, I hope the best for him, but I'm definitely not counting on anything from him. And then anything that we get from him will just be icing. It'll be bonus. As far as Santillan and Sims go, I think both of those guys have been projected to be back for spring training. Their offseason workout timelines have both have them looking like they're going to be back for the regular start of spring training. So I'm counting on both of those guys to be in this bullpen and be big parts of this bullpen. Listen, Jeff, I know you were like me heading into the 2022 season. We thought those 2 guys were, closer arm 1A, 1B. So I would like to see them get back to that, because if they go out and sign one of these guys that we just spent some time talking about from the free agent market, add that to Alexis Diaz. Now you drop in Tony Santillan and Lucas Sims. It is a vastly improved bullpen for 2023.
100% agree. And I think that those 2 injuries as well, both being back injuries that Sims and Santillan incurred last year, I'm pretty sure, like, not being a medical expert here, but I'm pretty sure the whole idea for that is just rest, just, lay off of it for a little while. And from all reports are, since the fact that we haven't heard either one of those guys' names, I'm guessing that's what they've been doing. It's not like you go out and report, hey, they're resting really well. They are resting. But I think that's what they've been doing.
Steve McCoy asks about Derek Johnson. He says the pitching coach is good. Can't he spend time teaching the young guns? And yeah, of course, he's going to spend time. But there's a difference between teaching them, the mechanics of throwing a curveball that will break from 12 to 6 and having veteran leadership in the clubhouse that can get in their face if they're getting out of line, can help them navigate what it's like to be a young money-making dude in Major League Baseball and how to navigate all of the pitfalls that come along with that. There's lots more than teaching the game that I think we're looking for from veterans. And I worry that this team on the pitching side doesn't have enough veterans to help these youngsters through some of the challenges of being a Major League pitcher that have not so much to do with the game itself.
But I think this plays into something that Chris said in your guys' chat too, is that, he said the best way to learn a new pitch is to do it, to throw it in a game, not in a practice environment, not in a bullpen. It's not as if they can go out on their 5 days off and Derek Johnson's standing there and is like, this is how you hold it. This is how you throw it. This is how you release it. And then all of a sudden they know how to do it. You've got to throw it in the middle of a game. And when you talk about creating new pitches and teaching guys to pitch while also them getting used to Major League Baseball, a la Brandon Williamson, like if he is being taught and he's getting reps, but he's getting destroyed, he is not learning how to be a Major League Baseball player. He's learning how to suck. And we don't want guys to learn how to suck. We want them to learn how to succeed.
Oh, and these egos are pretty fragile. We don't want them to get their brains beat in right out of the gate and not be able to at least find some success. I think Derek Johnson does a lot of great things. And remember, he's also now in charge of the entire system from Cincinnati all the way down to Daytona as far as pitching goes. So there'll be some consistency.
Of his hand.
Yeah, for sure. So let's move on. Branch is asking us about one of the most fun guys in the minor league system right now. Branch wants to know, is it safe to fall in love with Ellie De La Cruz, or is there still a possibility of a bust? Well, I mean, yeah, there's a small possibility that he might not be able to put it together. But listen, everything he has shown us so far is he goes to a new level. He spends about a week adjusting and figuring out a little bit of differences that he needs to tweak. And then he starts mashing. He's been mashing since Daytona. He mashed in Daytona. He mashed in Chattanooga. He is mashing in the Dominican. He was just the player of the week in the Dominican Winter League. The guy is crushing the baseball and like quite literally crushing the baseball. I'm talking about hitting that ball 500 feet at times. So I think he's probably a guy that we can start to love and that's going to be around for a long time.
It's been a long time since the Reds have had a top prospect that has destroyed everything he's touched. When we talk about Ellie De La Cruz, there's always a possibility for a bust. I mean, he's a prospect. Until you are a major leaguer, the term prospect means that there is an inherent risk. But with him, every level he's touched, he has destroyed. And even the Dominican Winter League, I was on Reds Reddit the other day, and there were some folks that had said they'd watched him play, and they're like, he's the best player on the team. There's some pretty good players on his team. So it's just awesome to see a guy like that, and I cannot wait to see him face major league quality pitching and things like that, because it's really just going to show that this is the guy that there should be as much hype around him as there was around Jay Bruce. I'm trying to remember how much hype there was around Jay Bruce, but there should be more, because he is just that good, and the lineup is going to be that much better with him.
And it's so exciting right now to just start to peek ahead to 2024 and what things might look like. We spent a whole show talking about Noel V. Marte and the fact that he's now moved to third base. Seemingly creating a lane straight to major league shortstop for Ellie De La Cruz. And then you've got Matt McLain, who I thought would get an outfield look during the Arizona Fall League, but he's not. He's playing a lot of second base, which raises an interesting question that I would like to pose to you, Jeffrey. And that is, what do you do with Jonathan India? Because Matt McLain at second base is a way better defender, much smoother, can cover a whole lot more ground for a now shiftless infield than what Jonathan India can do. Could we see Jonathan India move to the outfield? Maybe left fielder Jonathan India?
That's going to be an interesting one. And you're right, because the importance of infielders with range returns as the shift disappears, because that's exactly what the Reds have been doing over the last couple of years. They're like, well, we can play guys out of position because we can move them out of position. We can put them in shifts and things like that. I've seen a lot of Jonathan India to DH and things. I don't think that's going to happen right away, because Joey Votto is going to DH quite a bit this year. But once Joey Votto is retired, or God forbid moves on and plays somewhere else, I hope he just retires. Then I think Jonathan India will see the bulk of DH time, because I don't necessarily know that he's got the arm to be a viable outfielder. And maybe that's just it. Maybe you stick him in left field and you hope you hide him a little bit. But I think defensively, where he was his rookie season, which was still kind of below average, has kind of gone even further on the below average side to the point that we might actually be calling him a bad fielder now.
And it's interesting, the DH. There's lots of guys that we want to give time at DH. So I think this team is not going to have a primary designated hitter. I think the designated hitter spot will become the off day ish spot where like Tyler Stevenson's going to go do that because we can't afford to put his bat on the bench, but we don't want him catching today. Jonathan India will DH today because we want improved defense wherever he's playing.
So let me
rotate guys that way.
Let me ask you that then. Is his position left field or is his position trade bait?
I think that his value was super high coming off of the rookie of the year. The injuries and the way that they limited him reduced his trade value. Now, when there were pockets of the 2022 season where he showed us he was still that player, he was still that major league level quality hitter. But he played on broken wheels for a majority of the season. So his value is down. I think heading into the 2024 offseason, you could have a conversation about trading Jonathan India, possibly if all of these other prospects are in place and have demonstrated, okay, yeah, this is what we're going to do. Then, maybe somebody does become expendable in that scenario and you can bring in help at whatever position you needed at the time.
Yeah. I could see that. It's funny because like 6 months ago, I would have said that's a crazy notion, but it sort of seems like they're starting to stack up this idea that yes, he is expendable. And it's crazy to think that because 6 months ago, I would have said, oh, he's an obvious candidate for face of the franchise.
I put William's comment up on the YouTube screen for the listeners. It says, good question, Jeff. Hate the thought, but ... And I put this up here just because someone thought you had a good question, Jeff. I wanted you to.
I like it when people think
a little affirmation for you there. It's interesting because Greg Hughes mentions Nick Senzel. Said he read the same thing about Nick Senzel, and I have a hard time seeing Nick Senzel on this team beyond 2024 at this point. Unless he puts together a 150 game. 130 OPS plus season in 2023. I think his days are numbered. They can't afford to let him go right now because there's just no depth. There's nobody to replace him and they need as many games from him as they can get. But barring something miraculous from him in 2023, I think his days are probably numbered.
He's going to have to acquit himself as the super utility right-handed platoon to everybody in the outfield. He's not going to be a surefire center fielder anymore. He's just going to play where they need him to play and when they need him to play, because just the way that he performed when he was healthy last year, which again, that was his most healthy season, and he still didn't give us a full season. He just didn't seem like the kind of guy you have to make space for. And I have seen some folks that are just like, trade him. You got to trade him right now. If Jonathan India is on the low end of his value, Nick Senzel's trade value is almost nil. Like, I think you'd have to attach somebody to Nick Senzel to make a trade at this point.
It would definitely. It always cracks me up. I mean, and I get the inclination to just be like, the guy's a bum, trade him. Well, yeah, if he's a bum, who's going to take him? I mean, what is the scenario where we get something in return for him? And
then the other thing is, well, we'll get somebody else's bum. Why do we want another bum? If we're trading a bum to get a bum, then what's the point?
There's the occasional change of scenery deals that work out. But they're few and far between. They're not the norm. They're the exception. So it just doesn't happen. Let's
consider Jeff Hoffman, but yeah, I don't know.
Oh my God. Car family favorite, Jeff Hoffman. I love it when you work in your favorites, Jeff. Mother Goose asks, anyone know what the 2023 budget is for the Reds? How do you feel when the Cards president of baseball operations state that the payroll is going up? Sorry, reading is hard for me. It's early here in Hawaii and the coffee has not kicked in. So we think the budget's going to be pretty status quo for the Reds. Jeff and I are in agreement that we think they're going to land around $120 million as a cap a self-imposed cap. They currently have about, if you take in all of the arbitration numbers and all of the expenses, they sit at about $86 million. That means they probably, let's just round it all out and say they probably have $25 to $30 million to play with in the free agent market if they choose to go that route. Now, I'm not saying they're gonna, but that's just our best guess with the information that we have available to us. How does it make me feel that the Cardinals are going to spend more money?
I would love to say that we could worry about the Cardinals right now, but we can't. We just got to worry about the Reds. Like the Reds.
Their devil magic is their own special thing. And, are they going to compete for the division? Probably. Are the Reds going to compete for the division? No. I still think with strategic signings, the Reds in 2023 can sneak into a competition for the final wild card spot. Listen to me when I'm talking about the playoffs, I am not talking about a division winner. They're not getting a first round bye. They could accidentally stumble, bumble, fumble their way into being in the conversation for the final wild card. I'm not saying they're going to get it. And I'm definitely not taking the over, I don't think, in this coming season, but they could possibly be a little bit better than we think if they stay healthy.
But here's what I've been thinking for the last couple of years, and even including 2021, where we had the awesome Nick Castellanos, Jake Woodford moment. I think the Reds and the Cardinals are rivals in the sense that the Bearcats and the Buckeyes are rivals. Like it's very obvious who's winning this rivalry right now.
And it's not Bearcats and the Buckeyes are rivals.
That's what I'm saying.
Bearcats are not rivals.
That's what I'm saying.
I know. I just want to make fun of the Bearcats. They're the little step kid. They're the little guy that came a long way later that nobody wants to even bother paying attention to. I'm sorry. I can't help it. I know you love your you love your Bearcats. I just sorry.
No. And I know, but like as a Bearcat fan, to say that the Bearcats are rivals with the Buckeyes is to say that they're on the same playing field, and that's not the case. The Reds are not on the same playing field with the Cardinals because they don't operate their team as well as the Cardinals have for decades. I get it. 2010, 2012, 2021, there seemed to be some closeness between the two sides, but I still look at the Cardinals as head and shoulders above the Reds until the Reds can have some sustained success. And I hate to say that because it sounds like I'm on the side of the Cardinals, and I'm not. I hate the Cardinals, but I hate the Cardinals because we ain't the Cardinals, and I hate to admit that too.
It's funny. The Cardinals continue to come up in conversation, Jeff. They came up when I sat down with Mo. They came up when I was talking to Chris. The Cardinals are going to make a run to win this division in 2023. And interestingly enough, the Milwaukee Brewers are making changes in their front office as well. And I think that the Brewers will make a push to remain at the top of the division. So it's probably a 2-horse race in 2023 for the National League Central, and everybody else is just going to look for their participation trophy.
And obviously they've got to make the moves, but based on what they're saying in Chicago, I think it might be a 3-horse race depending on how they move and what they do. But the Cubs are ready to spend, reports are, and they're going to be active players in this free agency for big name guys. So look for them to kind of take that next step and close the gap between the top and them. And it's going to be the Reds and the Pirates battling it out for not last. Yeah. If
the Ricketts letter is an indication, that's what they're going to be doing. They're going to compete as well. So it'll be us and poor Ethan, Locked On Pirates. We'll be hanging out a lot, commiserating. Listen, Jeff, Marty Brenneman said some things recently, and some of them we're not going to get into today. I'm just going to tease that I am going to be coming with the gasoline-fueled fire on Monday, talking specifically about the position of first base and how history rates the Reds players that have played there. And there's going to be a lot of folks angry with me on Monday. You're going to want to tune in for that because I am definitely going to start some stuff. And Jeff has given me a green light to do it, which means look out, people. I have some things to say about first base, but Marty said some other things that I thought were interesting in relationship to the outfield, because he named his all-time outfielders, Jeff, and and Foster wasn't one of them. And I was a little surprised to not see Foster on the list. He had Junior Griffey, he had Eric Davis, and the third one is escaping me.
I'm done.
I don't think it was Adam Dunn, but it wasn't George Foster. And, I would just wanted to like pitch at you when you talk about all-time Reds and Davis, Junior Griffey, and Foster. Now, if you're taking careers as a whole, I think, we got to put Junior Griffey in that conversation, but is Junior Griffey a all-time Red outfielder?
That is a tough question because
he's an all-time baseball outfielder,
yes.
But is he an all-time Reds outfielder?
His best years were definitely in Seattle. They weren't here. He did have a couple of really amazing years when he was healthy, but health comes into play. And if you're not on the field, it's hard to say that you're a good Red. That's tough because his criteria also was during his tenure as broadcaster, which I still probably would put Foster in over Griffey, but that is a tough thing to say because there have been some really good outfielders in this organization. And you go back to times, and if we remove the whole stipulation of eras and the worrying about who can hit what fastball and things like that, like you also bring Ed Roush into the conversation, who was an amazing guy to hit for average and very good fielder and good base runner and things like that. So you open up a whole can of worms with some different criteria there. But I think during his tenure, I think I would put Griffey fourth, not third.
And they dropped that little caveat later in the conversation with Marty. Like, it wasn't in the question. It wasn't right up front about it being within his tenure. They added that in later. I don't know how I feel about that. I almost feel like they were trying to rescue Marty's list a little bit. I don't know. But if we're going to remove that stipulation, then you have to start talking about Frank Robinson. You absolutely have to talk about and Vada Pinson. Both of them. And Vada Pinson should be in the Hall of Fame, folks. I don't know. The more distance we get from Vada Pinson, the more people forget about him. If you're bored and looking to find some baseball to look at, go Google Vada Pinson and look at his numbers and tell me how that man is not in the Hall of Fame.
His numbers weren't good. They weren't great. They were epic. Epic numbers.
They really were. Well, we're kind of starting to wind down here. So this is your last chance watching us live. If you've got some questions or comments that you want us to get to before we wrap it up for the day. Looking ahead, Jeff, let's talk for just a second about some of the stuff we want to spend time talking about in the offseason as a little bit of a primer for the people watching and listening, and give them an opportunity to shoot some ideas our way as well, over the course of this offseason. Yeah,
definitely. We are going to look, we're going to have this conversation. Is this going to be the final year that Joseph Daniel Votto is a Cincinnati Red? In what shape or form that might take, we are going to dive into that thought process. We're going to look at exactly what the Reds can do to make sure that Tyler Stevenson is in the lineup every single day. And I think we've hinted on it a little bit. We're going to break down as to why we think this, the stat obviously out there that, with him in the lineup, they scored over 5 runs a game. So to leave him out of the lineup is to basically handicap yourself and put one arm behind their back. So we definitely want to dive into that. We want to look at who we think is the best. And I think that it seems obvious at first, but I think there's more of an argument as to who the best pitcher is on this staff for the Cincinnati Reds. And just how good is Alexis Diaz, and can he even replicate it? And what is his intro going to be? Because obviously we need to get into that. Plus, is David Bell going to be the manager of this team when they're good again? I think that is a question that has many answers, and it's not going to be something that we know the right answer to right away, because I think we've posed the option that, okay, probably in the future he moves into the front office as more of a general manager type guy, and we see somebody else in the managerial chair. But is David Bell that guy? There's so many ways to look at that, and we're going to dive into those many ways.
And in addition to that, we're going to spend time breaking down probably each and every player that we believe will be on the active roster come opening day. We'll spend time keeping you caught up on transactions and things that hopefully Nick Krall is doing this offseason to help shore up this team just a little bit. There's going to be lots to talk about in the hot stove portion of this offseason that I think will keep the Reds relevant and interesting. Jeff and I are going to be at Reds Fest, you guys. If you're going to be at Reds Fest, Jeff and I are going to be there on the Saturday Reds Fest. That is December 3rd. We're going to be wandering around. We'll have some fancy red Locked On Reds shirts, polo shirts. So look for us. You see us out there, make sure you come say hi, come talk baseball with us. We love it. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. And then rumor has it that Steve and Jeff are going to be at the Bengals Chiefs game the following day. Yes, we are. So before we wrap, let's get into, one or two more things here, Jeff, and we'll get out of here. William Martin would like to discuss what catcher could the Reds add to make Tyler Stevenson be able to share time at the position? And we've talked about this a little bit. Jeff, you're kind of all in on a Tucker Barnhart reunion, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Tucker brings with him familiarity with the franchise. He brings with him the ability to handle a pitching staff from day one without even worrying about stuff. I just think that overall his departure was a mistake, and I'd like to see the Reds admit that by bringing him back. And I think they cleared the way because I kind of wondered if they would hold on to a guy like Aramis Garcia or if they would hold on to Mark Kolzvari and say, well, we've got our backup catcher. But they immediately said no because they put him on waivers and they're all gone. Or they just outright released him. So I look at this and I think this seems like they have paved the way, at least on the roster, to bring him back. And like we mentioned, they should have a little bit of money, not a ton, but a little bit of money to spend on free agents. And you could probably bring him back for about $4 million a year.
I think even less than that. I think it'll be even a little bit less than that. Look, he had a not great year in Detroit. Yeah. And, they're not going to bring him here to be an offensive powerhouse. That's not what they're going to be looking for in Tucker Barnhart. They're going to look to have a catcher that can catch. That'll be a nice change of pace for what has happened in 2022. And they're going to have a catcher. We've talked about being able to manage all of these young pitchers, and Tucker Barnhart is a guy that can manage all of these young pitchers. If he comes in here and hits 220, 230, that's a win. That's a win for this team. That's a major upgrade for what they were doing. I think that with all of the catchers being sent on their merry way, it also proved what I was thinking towards the end of the season, which is Chucky Robinson really proved himself to be the new emergency guy. He's going to be the new guy at catcher that just kind of sits around Louisville, doesn't do a whole lot spectacular, but can come up and be solid for you in 5, 6, 7 game stretches if there's an injury. Love that guy. I think he's a great story. I'm glad they kept him around. I'm glad he's going to be that guy. But for me, Tucker Barnhart's the answer.
Yeah.
I think that's the one.
And you need him for next year and maybe 2024, because I don't necessarily know that Matt Nelson or Daniel Villohin will be ready by then. But when they are ready, those are the guys.
And let's end it on this note, from causing a catastrophe, and this would be a catastrophe. Let's be honest. The Reds need to sign Bartolo Colon.
I would love that.
Well, I think it would be great, and it would be nice for Jeff and I to both have players that resemble our shapes. It would be very nice.
I would get a Cologne jersey the day they signed
for sure. 100%. All right, Jeff, I think that is probably a great spot to wrap up this live edition of Locked On Reds, guys. In the comments, watching us live here, thank you guys so much. These are my favorite shows to do. You guys know that. I say it all the time. This is my favorite part of being on the show and being a podcaster. It's just so much fun interacting with you guys and taking your questions and your comments. Keep them going. Hit us up on Twitter. It's right there on the screen for the YouTubes. For the audio feed, I'm at S. Offenbaker with 2 F's. He's Jeff Carr. He's at Jeff Carr. Jeff with 3 F's. All right, Jeff, take us home.
Steve, we want to thank everybody for listening to us and watching us here on this live version of the Locked On Reds podcast. Now go check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. Locked On Sports Today has you covered for all of the big news, the big games, recaps, transactions, press conferences, everything that's going on in the world of sports, and they're going to do it in 22 minutes or less. Host Peter Bukowski brings you interesting interviews with Locked On personalities, and is produced by yours truly. That's Locked On Sports Today, just like Locked On Reds, free and available on all platforms, including, and it's on something that we're not on yet, but it's on streaming apps. You can check it out. Look for Locked On Sports Today. Steve, it's a long off season. We're going to get a free agency underway in about a week, 2 weeks. I don't know what time is. It's a construct. What's that mean for you and me?
That means we're going to be busy. The off season is going to fire up. We're going to be busy watching the hot stove, and we will keep you guys updated because we will keep you, just like us, locked on Reds every single day. See you next week.